Joan,
Hi.
are you back? Oh my God, how typical is that? I was just saying we've been chatting away for the last 10 minutes, and then as soon as we go live, I lose you. Can you see and hear me okay now?
Happening?
Gosh. Well, look, we'll get started anyway. So, hello, everyone. Sorry for that little interruption at the start. Welcome to this week's episode of Event Insights. My name is Chrissy. I am the head of content and community with Safe Events. And joining us today, we have Joan Saunders-Reece. Hi, Joan. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
So, Joan has worked her way up through the ranks of London Underground. She started off as a guard. She worked as a driver, a fleet instructor. She also worked as a duty train manager, and then worked her way up to the emergency response unit. So I think there is no better woman to speak to us today. Joan is going to be talking about how London Underground work with event organisers to get attendees safely to and from events. So Joan, I'll hand it over to you. Oh gosh, maybe I won't. Can you hear me, Joan?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you very well. I can hear you. So I'm going to sort of turn screen share on now. Is that all right?
You turn your screen share on.
Yeah.
And then if someone in the chat can let me know if they can see that, because I can't see Joan anymore.
Can anyone see the screen?
There we go. I can see it now, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chrissy, for giving me the chance to talk today. And thank you to all of those of you who dialed in today to hear and see what I'm going to be talking about. And it's also about mastering the events transport. So for events which take place in London, and how we on London Underground deal with it. So just to give you a little bit of a background, that is me. I'm an emergency planning manager. And some days they say that I'm a subject matter expert, other days they don't, but there we go. And I'm also an associate lecturer with the Emergency Planning College, and somewhere along the line I sort of took up a degree in terrorism studies, which is not exactly sort of what I do today, but there are some areas which cross over. So what we're going to be doing today, to give you an overview of the role of a major transport provider, to give you an overview of what London Underground and sort of in a sense Transport for London, which is the buses, trams and all the other bits of the transport, what we do, but in particularly London Underground, what we do to get everyone safely to and from the event. And at the end, you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you may want to ask. Please feel free to ask any questions. If I can answer them, I'll answer them. If I can't, I'll just get back to you. So a little bit about myself. As Chrissy had said, I joined London Underground many moons ago when dinosaurs roamed the face of the earth, 1986, and I started off as a guard emergency train driver. I then became a train driver on the Northern Line. And for those of you who know how London Underground operates, I was the first female train operator on the Victoria Line. Then for some mad reason decided to teach people how to repair and maintain trains. Then went on to become a troubleshooter. And then also from there, the first female emergency response unit duty manager. And I'll tell you a little bit about that role later on. I then went into our control centre as a coordinator, and that was all about passing information up to the incident management, the gold, and down to the bronzes, and in between to the silver. I then moved on from there and went into emergency planning, and then also emergency planning for the Bakerloo, Central and Victoria lines. Those are the main lines I deal with, but I'm also competent and qualified to deal with all the other lines on the Underground. And I also do subject matter expert work when we have to deal with industrial action. So if we have a plan in place and it's during a strike, I need to ensure that people work to that plan during an industrial action. And if people need to dial in and ask me questions about what they can do and what they can't do in terms of running a service, I'm the person they turn to. So that gives you a little bit of a context about what I sort of do. And that sort of will show you sort of how I do what I do, and sort of cements the experience and knowledge which I have into what I do. So, London Underground, we need to show that we run a safe railway, and we have to maintain emergency plans as laid down in the following documents. London Underground's LU Safety Certification and Authorisation document, and that was formerly the Railway Safety Case. The Railway and Other Guided Transport Systems, Civil Contingency Act of 2004, Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, and the British Standards Crisis Management Standard. So those are some of the things that we need to fall in line with. And if we don't, then, you know, there's going to be problems. We can be prosecuted. And this is to show that, as I says, we run a safe railway throughout. So we also fall in line with the London Emergency Services Liaison Panel, otherwise known as LESLEP. And this is an old cover of the procedure manual. And that means we've got the gold, silver and bronze. Team leader, site commander, if we could call it, and overall person, overall in command, our strategic person. So, this is London Underground. Is it a rush hour crush, or is it sort of managed chaos? Now, this picture was taken, I think that was taken just around about when we were doing sort of Christmas shopping, and this was pre-pandemic numbers, I must admit. And it's all about how do we manage people going into our stations safely. And this is not only for events, but also for things like if there's a transport failure somewhere else, or because they've got an event in the local area. How do we sort of manage that and ensure that people get to where they're going safely? And as you can see, some of our entrances, the stairways, you've got stairways going down, and it's also about managing those people safely into the station and ensuring those people within the station can continue their onward journey and getting people out of the station. So this is something which happens, it's all part of the day job. Somewhere on the underground, you're going to have a load of people trying to get in the underground, and sometimes we have to slow them down or even stop them because the numbers have increased. We're sort of about 80%, 85% of pre-pandemic numbers at the moment. But we're slowly getting there. But one of the things we've found since the COVID pandemic is that whereas we used to have people who used to come into London Monday to Friday, a lot more people are working at home. So we find we have more people traveling Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. And we also find on the weekend, especially in London, it is busy as a midweek sort of day. So we've also had to sort of adapt how we operate stations in relation to the new sort of travel patterns as people. So here are some of the events that I've been involved with and which are part of London. Working for such an iconic organisation as London Underground, I get involved in all these things. And as you can see, royal weddings, last year the Queen's funeral, I was actually abroad when that happened, and I was asked to come back to London. But what I was able to do was do much of the work where I was abroad and then come back to London to sort of get involved with the final preparation for the Queen's funeral. Every year we have London Marathon, Ride London, and other international sporting events. And some of these events can be high-risk events. So we need to sort of ensure that we have the right people in there at the right time and the right places. We've also got music events such as Wireless in the Park. We had Beyonce, Arctic Monkey, and All Points East. And then we've got other events such as Pride, and also 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, the London Notting Hill Carnival. and you have in the Notting Hill Carnival, you have approximately about over 1 million people trying to get into a small area. And you may have just under that all trying to sort of use the underground near enough at similar times to go home. So how do we manage that? Now, with London Notting Hill Carnival, that takes 15 months to plan. So before we've even finished planning for one, we're starting planning for the next one. And also New Year's Eve celebrations, that's sort of a 10-month lead time in planning that. And it's all about ensuring that everything works on the day. And it's not only for London Underground, but we also have to work with other people, such as the police, fire and ambulance, and most importantly, the event organisers. And we're going to come to sort of some of the things which we need to know and some of the questions we need to ask in a short while. And hopefully I won't sort of bore you to death by PowerPoint, but there's been a couple of pictures coming up. So this is New Year's Eve, and it is just an amazing evening to work, but it is hard work because a lot of those people are outside a station and they all want to, and they're in a viewing area, and they turn up sort of in dribs and drabs before the event, but at sort of 15 minutes past midnight, they all want to go home and get on the train the same time. We just can't cope with that. So we need to have a safe way in getting people in through the station and to complete their journey. And I'm sure for most of you, when you go away or go to an event, it's also about the experience is not only about seeing the concert or the sporting event, it's also about getting there safely and getting home again. Because you don't want to sort of find that you've got to walk for miles to go to an event. Chances are, if that's the case, if you have a bad experience or bad travel experience, you're going to sort of wonder or sort of query, do I really want to go to that event the following year? So it's all part of the whole experience of an event. And as I said 2 weeks ago, we had the London Notting Hill Carnival. And that is 2 days for me, apart from all the planning, that is 2 days of extremely hard work because we've got so much people coming through the station and so many things can happen. And we're going to go into some of the things that can happen during an event. So how it all starts. Well, with London Underground, a lot of the people we know, a lot of the event organisers we know, they will reach out to us, or because we've got a list of events which are going to take place, we usually get a call, get an email, and we go to a local planning meeting. And this planning meeting will involve the local authorities who will license the event and all the other partner agencies. So that includes other transport providers. It also includes the police, fire and ambulance, because they are involved in this. And not only does it involve the police, it may involve, well, 2 police forces, British Transport Police, who police the railway, and Metropolitan Police. And sometimes, on a very rare occasion, depending on what the event is involved, City of London Police. We don't get much from outside because we don't get such large events which involve people from other areas outside London. Notting Hill Carnival, that involves 3 boroughs. Chelsea and Kensington, Kensington and Chelsea, Westminster and Brent Council. So when you go to a planning meeting, you'll actually talking to people from 3 different boroughs, but there's always going to be a lead borough. So one of the most important things we need to know is the event date. When's it going to start? Where is it going to be? And the finish time. And the reason why we need to know that is because we can then start planning on what train service we can offer. Now, we're not going to create a train service for the event, and it's very few events that we create a train service for. So, for example, the royal funeral, that was already sort of enshrined somewhere in a plan Operation London Bridge about what train service we would provide. And depending on, we had many years ago, for those of you who've been around the block like me, Live 8, where that was a long time in planning and we could actually plan an all-night service, something like that. And we need to know the location because that will determine what station we will designate as our event station. Now, some stations, it might be the nearest station to the event, but it might not always be the best station because it's a small station. So we have this discussion in the planning meetings to say, you might want to start thinking about advertising that people go to this station and not that station. And we also have to take into account what other local events are going on. So that goes all into the mix. And one of the other things that is important to us is how will the crowds be presented to us? Because we need to have the crowds coming to us in an orderly manner, because if they overwhelm the station or the stations, for safety's sake, we have to close. No ifs, no buts, we've got to close. Because it's pointless having people through the station, on the platforms. And if we've got crowded platforms, that presents another danger in itself. And we're also talking to, as I said, the local authority, the London boroughs, because they're the ones who are going to sign it off. Now, London Underground is never going to say to an event organizer, you can't have that event. What we're going to present in the licensing meetings is what days are the best days. We're also going to say to the event organizers, you may need to finish the event at this time in order that people can make their onward journeys. So for those of you based in the UK and in London, you know that we have a night tube service. The night tube doesn't operate on all lines, and it operates from Friday nights and Saturday night. And whilst we have a night tube service, after sort of about 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday and a Saturday night, our services ramp right down. So it's a train every 15 minutes. So whilst you can have an event that finishes at 10:30 or 11:30 night, it's going to take longer for customers to get home. Now, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we shut down our service that much earlier. We're not like the States where they've got double track layout, in New York where they've got double track layout. We have to get essential engineering work done in the space of about 4 hours. We've also got to get checks done on the track and on signalling. So it's important that we close down in order to do those things. So we can't afford to have, once our last trains are gone, that's it. Now, the problem with that is that if an event runs late during the week, it then means that customers may not be able to get home because we close our station doors and people are left outside. Now, it then becomes a problem for the Metropolitan Police because the Metropolitan Police have to deal with possible public order issues. If you've got vulnerable people who are outside, it could also become a local authority issue. We don't want to see people left behind because this creates an awful lot of problems. But at the end of the day, once our last trains have gone, we have to close the station. And we tend to close the station with enough time for customers to get down on the platform to get their last trains. And what I always say to friends and relatives, if they're going somewhere, don't aim for the last train, aim for the 2 trains before the last train. Then you know you're going to get to where you need to get to. And with these planning meetings, which take place depending on the event on a monthly basis or a 6-weekly basis, it depends very much what the event is. We have to ensure that the plans that we have works with that of the event organisers and other agencies. So, for example, the event organizer is going to bring in stewards and they're going to bring in a barrier plan. All that has got to work. And one of the guys from, I think it was Safe Events, was talking, I think it was 2 webinars previous, about the thick wad of documentation they have. In that documentation is how transport is going to operate on the day of the event. That's our input into it. So those are some of the things which happens prior to an event starting. Now, what are our limitations? The first thing let's sort of drop to, in fact, the first thing, London Underground is a heavily unionised organisation. Staff work to what's called a framework agreement, which limits staff working hours. So, for example, train operators do not work overtime, and we can't ask them to sort of run an extra train and work overtime. The only time train operators get overtime is when the service is running late and it's late for them to get to their booking off point. Station staff is a little bit different, but staff have to have a minimum break time between shifts. And with a heavily unionised organisation, these are some of the things which are maintained. So when we're running, when we have events such as maybe a worldwide concert, such as Live Aid, there's a lot of discussion which may go on at least a year before with the union to ensure we get everyone's buy-in so we can do this. We also have to ensure that, as I said earlier on, that planned maintenance and engineering work takes place. So if, for example, an event organizer says, I want to have an event on this day and on this line, what we then tend to do is say to the event organizer, we've got engineering work taking place. How are you going to get customers to your event, bearing in mind that that line or that section of line might be out? So those are the things which we want our event organizers to start thinking about or have a discussion with us prior to an event. And we try to ensure that everyone's working to similar dates and, you know, and create some sort of synergy somewhere along the line. Now, sometimes people say to us, can't you put on extra buses, extra trains, extra staff? As I said, it's a heavily unionised organisation. Staff can only work within certain hours, length of certain hours. And the other thing is, with all our staff, operational staff, the Drugs and Alcohol Act, they come under the Drugs and Alcohol Act. So that means we can do random drugs and alcohol tests on all our staff who are operational. And so it's very, very much organised, very regulated system with our staff. And then the other thing, it's one of the oldest underground railways in the world. And coupled with the Victorian bits of the railway and then modern day extensions, we tend to sometimes, this is where we get bottlenecks on certain stations. So for example, if you look at Oxford Circus Station, it originally was built for one line, but then so many years later another line joined, and so many years later another line joined. And during that time, when they built those extensions, they didn't think about crowd control. All those things weren't thought about. So you find that there's lots of little passageways, and although they're all covered with CCTV, we don't want to have a load of people in passageways, hanging around in passageways, trying to get to somewhere with all that congestion. Our idea is to hold people outside the station, because it's much easier for us to do that than have them in the station, and it causes congestion and people getting anxious and what have you. So those are some of the limitations that we have. So what do we do prior to the event? And this is for London Underground. We ensure that the station concerns have a plan. So that plan must say how the station will operate, how many staff are going to be there to operate that station, and if there's going to be a one-way system in, because some stations, for example, Finsbury Park, when we had the Wireless concert, we operated a one-way system where people went in one exit, they left the other exit. And we also had a barrier plan outside the station, which I'll show you in a slide later on, which shows how we control the flow of customers going into the station. And if it's a very large event, we need to sort of have a plan to show how the line and also how the network will operate. And this is for events such as your Notting Hill Carnival and your New Year's Eve celebration. It affects quite a lot of the underground, 3/4 of the underground. We also need to ensure that on the plan, whatever plan that is, whether it's the line plan, the network plan, or the event plan, what on-call people we have, because some of our assets or all of our assets work well, but when they're under extreme pressure, they may break down. So, for example, we need to have escalator teams on. Notting Hill Carnival, the escalators at Notting Hill Gate kept on going out. And this was because people operating the stop diamonds, people jumping up and down the escalators, which is not something the escalators are used to at the best of times. So they would cut out automatically as a safety, as part of the whole safety regime, and we'd have to get someone in to reset that. So all of that information, the event, what time the event will start and what time the event will finish and how the station will operate, all of that goes into an event plan. Now, as the emergency planning manager, one of the things that I do is I read the plan and I also validate the plan, put my name to the plan, and that plan is published on our intranet. We also make that plan available to everyone within TfL, from senior managers right up. And this is the plan that the stations must work to. If they deviate from that plan, they need to have a good reason. And because we are under the Civil Contingency Act, we also make these plans available, if requested, to the police, fire and ambulance, and also to the local authorities. So when I get a plan in front of me, I'm not going to sign that plan off until I'm happy that that plan will work. And sometimes that might mean walking the station. Now, with my experience and knowledge, I've been to all the planning meetings. I've done all the events that have taken place in London. So that gives me the experience to sort of understand if the plan will work. And if that plan is not going to work, I'm going to be asking questions from the station management team on what they've put in that plan. And I tend to be very, very strict about that. I'll send plans back to the station teams if it doesn't make sense, and sometimes the plan just doesn't make sense. So also one of the other things that we need to do, because out of the planning meetings, we've got to give this information to our comms team within London Underground. So, for example, travel information. This travel information will also go on the event organisers' websites to tell people how to get to the event. And sometimes there's also a tie-in in terms of getting, sort of Oyster card and a special discount, which is all part of the ticket. So all of that comes into place on some events. And it also goes out on all the various social media feeds to the public. How do you need to get to this event? What do you need to do? And problems you may have when you get to this location. And we also have internal comms. So that travel information, we print posters which go to all our gateway, to all our stations. And also we have gateway messaging. So sometimes all of this is input into the system, so that not only goes to the rest of TfL, but it also goes to our control centres, and it also goes to on the dot matrix signage on stations. It goes to train operators so they can make announcements also. Sometimes we upload the information on the train system so that the messages come through automatically. So there's an awful lot that goes into sort of getting an event up and running. And we also ensure that we upstaff our stations, because some of our stations will need more staff. We need to ensure that we get people safely through the station, and if necessary, we need to ensure that we have enough staff to hold customers outside the station if it gets a bit congested. And at this point, we'd like to know, or, you know, we've confirmed how the crowds are going to be presented to us. Now, sometimes this can get into a very interesting conversation with some event organisers. Not all, some we work with know how we work and they're absolutely brilliant. So it's all about what is your crowd barrier plan? How is this going to work by the station? Who's going to manage it? Because we do not manage the crowds outside our station. If there's a plan, if there's a barrier plan, it's managed by the event organisers will usually bring in a stewarding company. Neither is it managed, what some people seem to think, by British Transport Police or the Metropolitan Police. They are there for public order issues. So we also have to upstaff our infrastructure on-call teams, and as I said, lifts and escalators and any other person which we might think we need for that event. Not all the times, but some of the times. For Notting Hill Carnival, not only did we have an upstaffing of our lifts and escalator teams, but we also carried out maintenance work prior to Carnival to make sure all the assets in the event stations were working very well. And we also have a team of people called the Emergency Response Unit, and they're based at strategic locations around London. And if something goes wrong, a train is broken down, a broken rail, or something along that line, which I'll go into in a short while, they're actually there, and we can actually arrange for them to come down and get the service running, because we don't want to hold people outside stations. We don't want to hold people within our stations. We need to sort of make sure that we get people moving through the system. And as I said, also policing plans. We get a version of the policing plans, who's in charge, who do we need to talk to, from Metropolitan Police to, and in particular to British Transport Police, because if there's a public order issue, they need to respond pretty quickly. So it brings me to the event day. Slide number 16, we finally got to event day. How about that? So, for those of you who know, the event liaison team and multi-agency type control centre type organisation, we'll usually have one of our members of staff who is a qualified event manager who actually is embedded into the LT. Now, their role is to talk to London Underground to find out how the service is going and put that information into the LT so that they can sort of are aware of what's going on. We also have either myself or my manager, who's a contingency planning manager, at key locations. So for Notting Hill Carnival, my manager was at Westbourne Park and I was covering the Central Line stations, in particular Notting Hill Gate. And we also need to sort of ensure, and we're there not to run the station, but have an overview of the congestion on the stations and also work with the station staff in ensuring that they stick to the plan. Because yes, on the odd occasion, we have a rogue member of staff who decides to run their own thing and we've got to pull them back in line, because what they do or do not do can affect the rest of the line and the rest of the railway. And we also liaise with the police and also the event organisers, and also our control centre, our line control centre and our main control centre, and also the TfL, which deals with the other transport modes. We sort of deal with them. And as I said, public order issues with BTP. So those are some of the things which we actually do. On the right, you can see that is a knife. Yes, a great big whopping knife. That's not used to cut chicken by any chance, or meat or vegetables. Those are the things which the police have taken from people who have gone to an event or are going to the event. So we've always got to be sort of on the ball and making sure that if something like this happens, the police are quickly there to sort of deal with that. They're not there to manage how we run our stations, but they're there to deal with public issues and help us so that we can manage the station effectively. And this is Notting Hill Carnival. Now, this is the control centre, the station control room at Notting Hill Gate Station, pardon me. And this is one of the places where I will base myself in, because I can actually see what's going on across the entire station. And if necessary, I can go out and assist staff to deal with anything. But that is one of the best places for me to actually be. And as you can see, the crowds of people coming off the trains, usually it's very difficult to clear the platforms because the service is so intense. And sometimes we actually have to slow the service down or hold the service at certain points so we can clear the platform. Some of our stations, unfortunately, one of them being the Victoria line, was built after the war. It was built on the cheap. So whilst we have very long platforms, the platforms are quite narrow. They're not deep. So sometimes we'll get a lot of people on a platform, and where we struggle is to clear them. If they're walking slow, they've got buggies, they've got suitcases. These are the things which slow people down. So when we arrange all the planning for events, we can actually tell if an event finishes at a certain time, whether there's going to be people left unable to get home, or we can clear the amount of people, because we've got the data, we've got the train data, we know how much people can actually be in the space of a station. So if that event finishes at, say, 10 o'clock, we try to sort of say to event organisers, finish your event at 2200, 10 o'clock, because that can guarantee that people get home. And that is Sunday to Thursday. If the event goes on to 10:30, 22:30, the likelihood of everyone getting to their final destination is remote. And that means people are going to be left. So what we try to do is say to event organisers, 22:30, beyond 22:30, you're cutting it a bit fine, because we can guarantee that there'll be 10,000 people left to find other alternative means of transport. And when you think some of our buses only hold about 70 or 80 people, and a tube train can carry about 1,000, 1,200 crush loaded, you can see the amount of people that we actually move. And as I said, in terms of how crowds are presented, this is Notting Hill Carnival just a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that actually happened was that in discussion, a barrier plan shows that they actually put in these barriers which protected our station, because on the picture, which has got the no entry signs there, outside, out of shot, what happens is that there's actually a queuing system that queues people into the station, and it also pushes people away from the station so we don't have any congestion around the station entrances. We operated a one-way system at Notting Hill Carnival, and as you will see, we've got the no entry signs. They look all nice and clean. They're a couple of hours later, they were all graffitied up. Why people do this, I do not know. But we have to put that in place so we can control the flow of customers coming in and getting out of the station. So as I said, how are crowds presented to us? This was how we dealt with it at Wireless in the Park in July. I think that was the 7th, 8th of July. We actually had a queuing system that actually allowed people to go to the underground and also to the national rail section. So the queue, and we actually split the station in two, so that people were going to the underground, and this was brilliant in terms of with the event organisers. They understood what we needed, and we've worked with them before. So And this is great when you have a good relationship with the event organisers. They get it, they know what it means in how we operate. So we had stewards who could actually direct people to which queue they needed to get into, and we could actually filter people into the underground side, into the national rail side, and if the underground side became congested, we held people outside, and as also with the national rail side. So it's really great when we have a good queuing system and we can actually control people into the station. But then there's things that happen outside our control. And the incident with the truck that happened a few years ago, Notting Hill Carnival. And as you can see a little underground logo at the top there. Yes, so that meant we had to stop the service with the trains running above. And we had to get an engineer to come down to check the bridge to make sure the bridge was all right. And these are some of the things that can happen and which we've got to sort of plan for, because if this happens, the service stops. Unfortunately, the incident on the right, it wasn't during an event, but an incident where a car ended up on the track with some people. We had some fatalities. And if this happens again, we've got to stop the service. If the police are involved, it's a scene of crime incident, declared a scene of crime incident, we're not going to get our railway back for quite a while. And this is where it becomes important for us to have someone in the ELT, because once something goes wrong on the underground, we can actually get that information into the ELT. The ELT and the event organisers, if they've got dot matrix signage, they can actually start diverting people to other stations. And sometimes we can actually say to people, you need to go to another station, and we can actually redeploy some of our staff to other stations to deal with the crowds who have now gone to this now new designated station. And as I said, things happen outside our control. Acton Town, a fire which took place at a tyre place just outside the station. Can we run a service? And if we can run a service, what sort of service can we run? Is it safe to run the service? So in our plans, we have to plan for things that are outside our control. Things such as a broken rail. And for those of you who can see that picture on the right, that was the London bombings. But when such things happen, we've got to be able to respond pretty quickly, and we've got to be able to divert people to other available stations. Yes, we do get a bit of rain. I must say it hadn't been a great summer until today, till this week in London, but there are times when we get flooding for whatever reason, caused by whatever reason. We have to stop the service and pump out the water or resolve it. Or we also have to get our emergency response team, those are the guys by that train, to remove a tree which has blown down. Sometimes it just comes down because there might have been rain a couple of days early. We've got to stop the train, remove the tree from the track in order to get moving. And we've got to make sure all this information, especially if there's an event taking place, this information is passed to the event organisers in the ELT so that they can start sending out messages, whether via dot matrix or Twitter or what have you. And we've got also Twitter and what have you to tell customers that they need to sort of change their journey plans. And again, these are some of the things that happen on the railway. Now, a few years ago, I was actually working up at Wembley, and we had to stop our service. And the service was stopped because someone had walked off the Jubilee Line platform, and we had to stop the service to do a track search. And we had people going down doing a track search while we stopped the service. Meanwhile, We had a lot of customers on the platform. We were starting to send out messages to customers. You might want to go to Wembley Central instead of staying at Wembley Park. We were holding people outside Wembley Stadium. They managed to find the person. And this person, the reason why they went down on the track was to have a poo. So because of them, the service was delayed, the service was stopped, and we had all these resources because of some selfish person. These are the things what happens on London Underground. And yes, whilst we don't have many events in the snow, well, we do have Winter Wonderland. Usually it's not snowing at the time, but you never can tell. If we have an awful lot of snow whilst we de-ice the track, sometimes it comes down so thick and fast that we get trains stalled. And the last thing we want is customers stalled on any trains. We want to get them off the system, get them to where they're going. Because if a train is stalled and customers are on the train, some of them may start to feel a bit distressed, anxious and upset. They operate the emergency passenger alarms. That creates more problems. And whilst it doesn't happen on London Underground yet, on the National Rail Service, they can force the doors open and walk on the track. And that is just more of a headache because then they've got to do a track search before they restart the service. So we're lucky in the sense that we haven't had to deal with that as yet. As I says, it doesn't happen without working with other people. And this is multi-agency working at its best. A little while ago, we had a person under a train incident. And as you can see in the ticket hall, we've got a meeting going on, British Transport Police. We've got the ambulance. We've got our mayor ambulance. We've got our emergency response staff and various other people. With events, it's the same thing. We're all working together to a common plan, because if we all have different plans, it's not going to work. So when these things happen, when something unexpected happens, what can we do? Well, we have to advise all the relevant stakeholders. So we have to advise our senior management team, we've got to advise stations, and we need to let everyone know what's going on. And as I says, because we have someone in the ELT, that person will tell that person in the ELT, and they can let the event organisers know. Other transport providers, emergency services, and we also put out a whole raft of network messaging so everyone knows. And that may also involve, as I said earlier on, redeploying staff to another station if they can help. Now, we've got a marvellous team, as I said, the emergency response unit. And if it involves something where a train has broken down, a broken rail or something like that, person on the train or anything like that, we've got a team who actually have a vehicle which has got a blue light capacity, which means they actually have a member of the British Transport Police in that vehicle, and they can drive that vehicle blue lights to an incident to deal with. And they can't drive it just to go down to Sainsbury's or Tesco's. They've got to actually get authorization from BTP Force Headquarters to switch on the blue lights. And that's usually only used when it involves a loss of life or potential for a loss of life. So on the screen, you can actually see our emergency response unit vehicle, fully equipped with enough stuff to get us out of most things. We can jack a train up, we can retrieve anything from under the train, because unfortunately we have people who will throw things like shopping trolleys on our tracks in the Altner section, and if that becomes welded on, we've got to discharge the current and get these guys down to cut it off. And we also have our emergency control unit. Now, this is a mobile control unit, and we can actually set this up at whatever location. That was Marble Arch we set it up at. And if the station control room is unusable, we can actually set up staff in there to operate from there, because it has all the comms, it's got satellite, it's got just about everything except a toilet, but you can make tea and coffee in there, and we can actually deal with anything relating to the station and or to the underground. And it's also got conference facilities in there. So that is brilliant. So after the event, yes, wow. What we do is we revert back to business as usual operations. So as soon as an event is coming to an end, we notice a reduction of customers coming through the station. Do we need to keep our one-way systems in? If not, we go back to operating business as usual. We also reduce the station staff and also for the infrastructure staff in the event footprint. And we're trying to get back to business as usual. And as I said, we configure our station to normal operations. What we also tend to have is a hot debrief. What went wrong, or what could we improve on? Let's put it that way. What went really well, what went well, and what could we improve on? Because this is not about blaming. We need to understand what we can do to improve. People then go off for a rest, and with something like Notting Hill Carnival, we've got so much kit out on loan, such as radios and loud hailers. We make sure those are returned and they're restocked, ready for the next event. And then what we try to do with most of our events is we have an internal debrief. Now that internal debrief is what we gather from the stations, what we gather from our command and control teams and everything. And then that feeds into the external debrief. And it's all about ensuring that if we have the event the following year, how can we make it better? And then it's all about refocusing and starting planning for the following year. And as I said, we've already started planning for Notting Hill Carnival 2024. I've barely had time to catch my breath and we're going again. And we've still got New Year's Eve to come. So that is about it in terms of what my role and what the rest of London Underground, my colleagues, do in ensuring that an event is safe, and the whole arrangements about dealing with events on London Underground. It is, as I said, an iconic organisation. We are sort of one of the major transport movers. We are the major transport mover in London. And some of the things that we do and continue to do continues to sort of amaze me. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop now to allow you to ask any questions that you would like to ask.
Thank you, Joan. That was fantastic. That was really interesting. It sounds like, I mean, as you said, you're already planning for Notting Hill 2024 and you've still got New Year's to come up. So it's obviously a very, very busy environment there.
Yes, it certainly is. It's ongoing. And since, I must admit, after the 2012 Olympics, it was like sort of London is open, and the events, we used to have a bit of a break in between sort of from Notting Hill Carnival, but now, you know, as soon as the weather starts turning warm, from about April, we're having events right through, and the summer, it's literally back-to-back events going right through until December, January, 6th of January, when Winter Wonderland finishes, I think. And then from there, it's sort of back onto the treadmill again. I feel a bit like a hamster at times.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So guys, as Joan said, if anyone has any questions, we'll pop over to the Q&A only section there on the chat on the right. We did have one earlier from Mark, and you kind of answered it after he put it in, but I'll read it out to you anyway. So Mark was asking, what is TfL responsibility if a problem occurs on the line and the trains are lost, meaning insufficient capacity is available to get people home? Now, you did kind of mention that that's already kind of in your plan. Would it ever be a case that last minute, maybe there's additional measures or additional trains or services kind of set up to handle those situations?
Sometimes we're in a position where, because of the how we roster stuff, because we've always got maybe one or two spare staff in sitting in a depot, and what we tend to do is, if the rostering and the timetabling is all sorted out, we actually may have a spare train sitting in a depot, so we can actually bring that into service. But that is during the times we operate. In terms of running an extra train, that is very unlikely to happen, because after our trains have stopped running, we've got a whole load of people, an enormous amount of people waiting to get down on the track to do some work. So we try not to let that happen sort of during the week. Friday and Saturdays, we run all night on about 4 lines, I think it is. So we can, we don't have it. But on the days when we don't have night tube, we've got a lot of people waiting to do some sort of work on the track. It's an old system. It's an old lady or an old gentleman. It needs a lot of pampering and tender loving care.
That makes sense. All right. So I suppose then, if people are trying to plan events midweek when you don't necessarily run them all night, and maybe would it be a case that you might have to change the schedule of when people are doing these kind of repairs on the tracks, or would that be something that the event organizers would have to work around?
Well, funny you should say that. That reminds me, our engineering work is planned with a minimum of 300, is planned. Right, let's get this right. There needs to be, it's a minimum of 365 days in advance of the work. So some of the engineering work, it's a year. If it's a full line closure, this could be 2 years or 3 years out. So chances of us stopping it for an event is virtually nil, unless it's something like a royal death. Right. Then everyone sort of works towards that. But we've got contractors and everyone, and we end up paying a penalty if we delay people from going on the track to do work. It's all very commercial these days.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are there any other questions then coming in? Otherwise, we will let Joan go. As usual, this session has been recorded. I'll be putting it up on the Safe Events YouTube page on Friday, and I'll also be sending out an email to everyone with the link if anyone does want to watch back over anything. Sometimes when that happens, obviously you might think of a question afterwards. You can feel free to fire them over to myself, and I'll ask Joan, and we'll be able to get back to you that way. But in the meantime, it seems like there are no more coming through. So Joan, I'll let you go. And thanks again. That was a really, really interesting presentation.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to talk. Thank you. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day wherever they are.
All right. We'll see you again soon, Joan. Thanks again.
Take care. Bye
now.
Bye.